Welcome back. In our last lesson, I talked about point source drip irrigation, where you have your half-inch drip line and you're snaking that out into the landscape through your shrub beds. And I recommended that this is best for either container plantings, but in the landscape for sparse plantings where you don't need to necessarily irrigate a great area of soil. And you want to just hit sparse individual plants. So that's point source. Line source, you are actually watering the area. It's almost like, I'll say, using a sprinkler situation where you're trying to get a relatively even precipitation rate over your soil, over your surface. With this, you're doing the same thing, but you're doing it much more efficiently. The thing about drip irrigation or line source irrigation, all of these apply the water at the ground level where the roots are. With spray irrigation, particularly when you're dealing with shrub beds, over time those plants, surprisingly enough, grow, and as they do, they block the spray. That's where the efficiency drops off. You've got plants blocking all of these different sprays. So we want to lay this in to where we have an even grid work. That's the idea of using line source or inline drip irrigation. So looking at my board right here, I might have an irrigation valve at this point, and that valve I'm going to notate it's a drip valve. And with line source, what we're trying to do is create an even distribution of water. So typically I'm going to have my lateral spacing. So I'm coming out of my valve, and once I'm out of the valve, these are my laterals, but I'm going to go into what's called, there's a couple of different ways to configure this. With this being line source, I'm going to do what's called a header. And so this is my header manifold right here. And I'm going to have T's plugged into it on a specific setting. Okay, so if I'm going to be doing 18-inch emitter spacing, I'll probably select 18-inch line spacing, and I try to lay this out to where the emitters are in a triangulation. So I've got an emitter, they're 18 inches apart, the next line is going to be triangulated to where I can make sure I get as good a coverage as possible. So for example, if I have clay soils, an 18-inch emitter spacing and an 18-inch line spacing is going to probably be quite adequate, because that water is going to percolate laterally in there more than going straight down into the soil profile. Whereas with sandy soils, I'm going to go with a closer emitter spacing, 12 inches, because this column of water is going to be going down at a much more direct rate. And then I'm going to use probably 16, maybe 18-inch line spacing. But that said, these are all just general guidelines, and each project is going to have to be looked at on its own merit. Now, in the resources section, I do have some downloads available put out by Netafim and Rainbird and I believe Hunter that will give you some design guidelines that you can use for your individual project. So what we're doing is now we've got our water coming in here, and I'm going to run my laterals evenly spaced and straighter than this, I hope, out into a grid pattern. Then I'm going to connect them again to half-inch. Well, this is all half-inch, but whereas this is called the header, this is now called, see if I can spell this, the exhaust. And this is where, if I've got water coming in here in the center, I'm going to have a flush valve at the hydraulic opposite of this. If my valve was coming in, let's say at this corner, then I'm going to have my flush valve at the opposite corner, the hydraulic opposite of where it's going. So this is what's called an end feed. Another way of laying out your system is going to be, here's my irrigation valve right here, and I'm going to come out of this, and I'm going to do what's called a center feed. And now I'm going to have T's again on equal spacing. Take this up a little bit. And I'm going to run laterals this way and this way, and then another exhaust header here. And if I'm coming in here, then I'm going to come out here and here with a flush valve so that I've got both sides flushing clear. One thing you want to think about with this, particularly if it's built in and installed underground, you're going to want to have an air relief valve installed. And these just plug in at the highest point. If you're just laying flat, you can put it in just about any place. But if you've got a little bit of a hill to it, a little bit of a crown, put it at the highest point so it can blow that air out. So I'm going to give links to some design guidelines. These are free resources that you can use for laying out your systems and determining how many feet of lateral you're going to need. It'll show different configurations, and I'm going to show how I laid out a grid system in my vegetable garden, and we can take a look at that. But that's coming up right now. I'm just going to go ahead and plug that in, and we can take a look at it. And that's kind of how you lay this out. It takes a little more work than just running a point source, but you lay this on this grid fashion, and it's going to water the entire area of your shrub bed, whatever it may be. And it's really effective. They don't clog up. I've been really happy with mine. I've used them for years, and I have basically been troubled maintenance free. So, okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.